I've been spending the last couple of weeks playing through the original Metal Gear Solid, and it's got me thinking, what makes Metal Gear Solid soundtracks so iconic? For people who may not know much about the games are a long-running stealth action series which mostly centers on the character Snake. Each game in the series is famous for confronting topics such as the cost and expansion of nuclear weapons, the ethics of warfare, the rise of AI, and the control and manipulation of information. In general, I found myself going down a bit of a rabbit hole with listening to the soundtracks for these games. And what I've found with the soundtracks is that they all have a unique kind of feel to them. At the same time, they fit within the universe of Metal Gear Solid. None of them really feel out of place. This clip from Daniel James, one of the composers on Metal Gear Solid 5, really sums up the vibe of each of the mainline games in the series.
I think because each game is sort of Kojima's love letter to a movie, and every soundtrack sort of represents that sort of genre, you know, like Metal Gear Solid 2 has got that like 90s action thriller, like Metal Gear Solid 3 is like the James Bond, you know, like, so if you're a fan of the games themselves, the soundtrack, while they can live in isolation, they absolutely live as a package alongside the games, more so than any other series I can think of.
It's got me coining at the Metal Gear Solid sound, the concept of spies and espionage. I mean, you kind of hear it everywhere in video games nowadays. That being one of a cinematic approach to writing music for video games, which involves soundtracks that use hybrid orchestral music, mixing different sections of the orchestra with electronic music. The Metal Gear and Halo series were true pioneers when it came to championing cinematic, hybrid orchestral music within the video game industry. I think the majority of the reason why Metal Gear Solid soundtracks are so iconic comes down to one thing, or should I say one man, Hideo Kojima. Not to take away any of the success of Harry Gregson-Williams and any of the other composers that worked on the series, but it's no secret that Hideo's success and visions for his projects have garnered him a cult-like following, even with this weird-ass trailer. Jokes aside, what's usually overlooked is his influence on the music in the series as a whole. The easiest example of this is the track Snake Eater from Metal Gear Solid 3. It sounds like the introduction to a James Bond movie, and that's exactly what he wanted. Hideo's explained this multiple times in interviews before. What I love about the soundtrack is it perfectly captures the vibe of a Bond movie. The game reflects this as well, based on when it took place, that being in the 60s, in the middle of the Cold War, and what could be argued the height of Bond movies. Hideo's approach to making video games is the same approach to directing a film. This feeds into the concept for his music. Even Metal Gear Solid 1 had cinematic music, even with the limitations of the PS1 hardware. With its beautiful and haunting track The Best Is Yet to Come, used in the final credits and multiple cutscenes.
Even I know that. It's the oldest trick in the book. The sniper's using me for bait to lure you out.
Damn.
Shoot me, Snake.
No.
My gun. I can't reach it by myself.
Don't move.
I promised.
Another example is the use of adaptive music, when the player is spotted by an enemy to when you break line of sight and enter a caution state. As you may have noticed, the melody completely drops off once the player enters a caution state, but the pulse of the synth and the bass remains until the player enters a normal state. This was pretty uncommon for games released in the 90s and the early 2000s. This is because of the limitations of the PS1, with it not really being able to hold live recordings, the move away from 16 and 32-bit sound samples, and the move to DVD-ROMs on the PlayStation 2. I talk more about this in my video on Halo. If you want to look at that video, you can find it in the link above or in the description. Hideo has been quoted saying with the success of Metal Gear Solid 1, he now had a budget to hire a Hollywood composer for Metal Gear Solid 2. However, when the team approached Han Zimmer's studio to look at hiring Hans, he was well over budget. Side note, if you don't know who Hans Zimmer is, he's just one of the most iconic music and film composers of the last 20 to 30 years. He's worked on soundtracks such as Pirates of the Caribbean, The Dark Knight, Interstellar, Blade Runner 2049, and the recent Dune movies, to name a few. So the decision was made to reach out to the composer Harry Gregson-William. He had worked with Hans closely and at the time had recently worked on the film Enemy of the State. Harry has been quoted saying that he never really considered writing music for video games. This was a common view in the music industry at the time, with most composers trying to break into Hollywood or writing music jingles for ads. What's interesting is how Hideo and Harry worked on the soundtrack for Metal Gear Solid 2. He said through this process he had no footage to use to write music to, and would have to rely on vague notions from Hideo, such as write me 30 seconds of sneak music. On top of this, Hideo and Harry had to work for a translator to help provide feedback and notes on the soundtrack. Harry worked and composed on the other mainline games in the series and a number of Hollywood films, such as the Narnia and Shrek series, and he's also worked with the director Ridley Scott. So those are some of my thoughts on why these soundtracks for the Metal Gear Solid series are so iconic. That is, its people, its ideas and concepts that brings these soundtracks to life. What do you think makes these soundtracks so iconic? Do you think I've missed something? Why don't you tell me in the comments below? If you find this content interesting, like and subscribe to the channel. Cheers.